Palestine is not just a modern-day issue. It is a city that has been fought over for more than 3,000 years. Around 3,300 years ago, Allah commanded Prophet Musa alayhi salam, to free the Israelites, the Jews, from Pharaoh's slavery in Egypt. After great struggle, Pharaoh finally released them. Moses then led the Israelites toward Palestine and told them to attack the city. But the Israelites refused and said, "You and your Lord go and fight, we will not fight." Because of their disobedience, Allah punished them to wander in the desert for 40 years. During those 40 years in the desert, the divine book Torah was revealed to Musa alayhi salam. In the Torah's first chapter, the book of Genesis, it is clearly written that the land of Palestine was granted by Allah only to the descendants of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. This is why even today, the Jews claim that, according to this verse of the Torah, Jerusalem and Palestine belong solely to the children of Israel, because they are the descendants of Ishaq alayhi salam, son of Abraham. And that seems logical at first, but when you read further in the Torah, it says that Abraham had not one, but two sons, Ishaq and Ismail alayhi salam. Ishaq was the father of the Israelites, while Ismail is considered the forefather of the Arabs. Even Jewish scholars acknowledge this fact. Therefore, according to their own Torah, Palestine does not belong exclusively to the descendants of Ishaq, but also to the descendants of Ishmael, the Arabs. After wandering in the desert for 40 years, the Israelites, under the leadership of Prophet Yusha alayhi salam, finally conquered Palestine. But soon after, the city slipped from their control once again. For the next 3 centuries, they could not reclaim it. Then, under the leadership of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, the Israelites recaptured Jerusalem. His son, Prophet Suleiman alayhi salam, built the very first temple there, a sacred house devoted to the worship of Allah. After Solomon's era, the Jews ruled over Palestine and Jerusalem for approximately 400 years, enjoying a rare period of peace and stability. But empires rise and fall. 4 centuries later, in Babylon, modern-day Iraq, a mighty ruler named Nebuchadnezzar forged one of the most powerful empires in history. With ambition burning in his heart, he marched upon Palestine, destroyed Jerusalem, slaughtered thousands of Jews, and demolished the magnificent temple that Solomon had built. Their surviving Jews were enslaved and taken in chains to Babylon, where they lived in captivity for 70 long, painful years. 70 years later, a new ruler emerged, a noble and righteous Persian king known as Cyrus the Great, or as Islamic tradition calls him, Zulkarnain. He conquered Babylon, liberated the enslaved Jews, and not only granted them freedom, but also financed their return to Palestine. He ordered them to rebuild the Temple of Solomon, the sacred structure that had once been razed to the ground. The Jews returned and rebuilt their city, ruling Palestine once again for the next 4 centuries. Then came another wave of conquest, the rise of the Roman Empire. The Romans invaded Palestine, crushed Jewish resistance, and expelled them from the land for the next 600 years. The Romans unleashed unimaginable brutality, massacring thousands, leveling the Temple of Solomon once again, and driving the survivors into hiding among the caves and mountains. The temple was never rebuilt. For 6 centuries, the Roman banners flew over Jerusalem. But empires, too, make fatal mistakes. 600 years later, the Romans attempted to suppress a new and rapidly spreading faith, Islam. Yet this move would seal their downfall. The armies of Islam, inspired by faith and unity, swept across the lands, conquering both the mighty Persian and Roman empires. Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu became the most powerful ruler in the world, his empire even larger than that of Alexander the Great. Under his command, Muslim forces marched to the gates of Jerusalem. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had already foretold that Muslims would one day conquer this sacred city. The siege lasted for 6 long months, until finally the governor of Jerusalem, Sophronius, agreed to surrender on one condition, that Caliph Omar himself come to receive the keys. The legendary warrior Khalid ibn al-Walid radiyallahu anhu, whose stature and appearance closely resembled Omar's, went in his place. But Sophronius, having met Omar before, immediately realized the substitution and insisted that the caliph himself come. So, the most powerful man on earth, Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, set out for Jerusalem. Sophronius prepared himself for a grand encounter, expecting to meet a king robed in gold and splendor. Yet when Omar arrived, he was barefoot, dressed in simple garments, while his servant rode upon the camel. This sight left the people of Jerusalem in utter disbelief. Never before had a conqueror entered their city in such humility. Unlike all those before him who had drenched Jerusalem in blood, Umar's conquest was peaceful. Not a single drop of blood was shed. He granted freedom of religion to all inhabitants, Christians, Jews, and Muslims to live side by side. Sophronius requested that Jews be barred from entering the city, but Umar refused this condition and welcomed them back. Thus, for the first time, Jerusalem came under the rule of the descendants of Ishmael, the Muslims.
For nearly 350 years, Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted peacefully in Jerusalem. But peace rarely lasts forever. 3.5 centuries later, the Christians of Europe gathered vast armies and launched the brutal Crusades. Taking advantage of the divisions among the Muslims, they invaded and seized Jerusalem. What followed was one of the bloodiest massacres in history. The Crusaders slaughtered tens of thousands of Muslims and Jews, set fire to mosques and synagogues, and turned the sacred Al-Aqsa Mosque into a royal palace. Historical records tell us that the streets of Jerusalem ran red with Muslim blood. Jewish women and children sought refuge in synagogues, but the Crusaders burned the buildings with them trapped inside, burning them alive. This was not legend or exaggeration. Even European historians confirm it. The Crusaders ruled Jerusalem for nearly 90 years, until a great hero arose, Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi. He united the Muslim world under one banner and marched upon Jerusalem. The Christian armies trembled, expecting vengeance for their own atrocities. But Salahuddin, following the noble example of Caliph Omar, granted them forgiveness. The Christians, astonished, asked him, "Why do you not take revenge when we filled your city with blood?" Salahuddin simply replied, "I am not like you." He restored peace, granted freedom of worship to all, and reconverted Al-Aqsa from a palace back into a mosque, where Muslims prayed once more after decades of occupation. Throughout history, whenever Jerusalem fell to others, it was soaked in blood. But when Muslims conquered it, they did so with peace and justice. After Salahuddin's era, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived harmoniously in Jerusalem for nearly 8 centuries. But history repeated itself once again. A century ago, during World War I, Jerusalem was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. When the war ended, Arab leaders allied with the British, seeking to overthrow the Ottomans, thinking, "Why should the Turks rule over us?" This rise of Arab nationalism fractured the unity of the Muslim world, and Palestine slipped from Muslim hands. However, long before the war, a secret pact had already been forged between the British and the Zionist movement. If Britain gained control over Palestine, it would establish a Jewish homeland there. By this time, Jews had become one of the most powerful and influential communities in Europe. leading in business, science, medicine, and finance. Securing their support was a strategic necessity for Britain. For nearly 1800 years, the Jewish people had lived without a homeland, and the idea of creating one had begun to spread. They chose Palestine, the land of their prophets and their past. Zionist leaders even approached the Ottoman Caliph, Sultan Abdul Hamid II, with offers of immense wealth in exchange for land, but he refused. Realizing the Ottomans would never agree, they concluded that the Ottoman Empire itself must be destroyed. When World War I ended and the Ottomans fell, Palestine came under British rule. Under this secret arrangement, Jews from across the world began migrating to Palestine, purchasing land from local Arabs at double and triple the market price. With abundant wealth, they expanded rapidly. The British government further legitimized this plan through the Balfour Declaration, promising support for a Jewish homeland in exchange for political and financial backing during the wars. After World War II, and following the immense suffering of Jews during the Holocaust, Jewish migration to Palestine intensified. Tensions between Jews and Arabs grew unbearable. The United Nations then proposed a partition plan, dividing Palestine into 3 regions, one for Jews, Israel, one for Arabs, Palestine, and Jerusalem as an international city under UN protection, open to all faiths. The Arab nations strongly rejected this decision. And so, a day after Israel declared independence, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria launched a joint attack. To the shock of the Arab world, the war was lost, to a state barely a day old. Israel, with global support, seized 60% of the land allocated to Palestine. Around 700,000 Arabs were expelled from their homes, becoming refugees overnight. Backed by the world's superpowers, including both the United States and the Soviet Union, Israel quickly strengthened its army and economy. Waves of Jewish immigrants arrived, while Arabs became a dwindling minority in their own land. Yet 2 territories, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, remained outside Israeli control. But history would repeat itself once more. In 1967, another war erupted, the Six-Day War. Egypt, Jordan, and Syria attacked Israel, but in just 6 days, Israel crushed all 3 and tripled its territory, capturing the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. Once again, the Arab nations suffered a humiliating defeat, a loss so shocking it was as if Khabib Nurmagomedov had lost to Hezbollah in a fight twice. These defeats shattered Arab faith in nationalism. Disillusioned, the people turned to a new vision, the Muslim Brotherhood, or Ikhwan al-Muslimun, founded in Egypt by the school teacher Hassan al-Banna, inspired by the thoughts of Maulana Maududi of Pakistan. Before this, Islamic movements were ridiculed in the Arab world, but after repeated humiliations, the Brotherhood declared, "It is not Islam that failed, it is your leaders who are Muslims only in name." The message resonated, and the Arab masses began to rally behind Islam once again. From this ideological foundation rose Hamas, the Palestinian resistance movement, inspired by the Brotherhood's vision, though the Brotherhood itself opposed violence. Yet after Israel's 1967 conquest, when it occupied the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, no power on earth has been able to take those lands back since.